Hi, my name is Donnie Redford. I work on a mental health treatment team at the Chesterfield County Community Service Board, or CSB. I'm starting to do interviews with people who have had struggles with mental health and have a spiritual side of themselves that has aided in their recovery. On this interview, I spoke with Maryalyce Evans about her journey with mental illness and being a strong believer in Jesus Christ. Maryalyce is a speaker, writer, and has lived experience being treated in the mental health system. She is also a well-respected employee of the Chesterfield County CSB with 22 years of experience with clinical work in the mental health field. She was diagnosed at age 28 with manic depressive illness, which is now called bipolar illness to lessen the stigma. She has not had an episode or needed to be hospitalized since 1990. She started the first bipolar support group in Richmond in 1985. She participated in a 2-year educational program at Virginia Institute of Pastoral Care in Richmond and received a certificate of completion. She also participated in a 4-year educational program at Loyola University in pastoral care, where she received another certificate of completion. In this interview, you will hear some of her story from her. You will hear how she has woven her faith in God all throughout her personal life and in her work life in the mental health field. Have a listen. Hi, Maryalyce. How are you today?
I am great. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Well, let's get right into this. I wanted to interview you today and ask you some questions and get some answers from you because I know you're experienced in the field of mental health. So, first of all, what kind of home did you grow up in? Like, what was the atmosphere like, kind of from your first memories to growing up?
Okay. I was born in a place called Chesterfield, Pennsylvania. It's outside of Scranton. My dad was a part owner of an airport, and he did that, Wyoming Valley Airport, and he did that for several years. And then we moved closer to the airport. We moved to Wyoming, Pennsylvania. And I was like 3 or 4 years old. So at that time, he was running 2 airports, one in Homesdale, Pennsylvania, and one in Wyoming. And we moved to Peckville. So I moved around a lot, shifted a lot. And, it was difficult to do that for a child. And then my mom saw an advertisement for TWA for a flight engineer. And Dad said, I'd stick with the small airplanes. And my mom kept saying, you could do this. Well, he went for the interview and he did it. So then in the 4th grade, we moved to Bloomfield, New Jersey. And he flew out of Idlewild, LaGuardia, and JFK then.
So he was a pilot?
Yeah, he was a pilot.
Okay.
He was a flight engineer.
Flight engineer.
He was a flight engineer, which meant a pilot had to depend on him for overseas flying. It was the prop planes, the Connies and the Martins.
Mm-hmm.
So we stayed there for 4 years. 3 years. And in the 6th grade, when I was in 6th grade, I do things according to years, I guess. And in the 6th grade, my dad came home and said he got laid off because the Boeing 707s came in, and they didn't need a flight engineer. And so he said he did some odd jobs, took monkeys to Africa, picked up monkeys from the United States and all kinds of stuff like that. Odd jobs, flying jobs. And so he applied for the FAA, and we moved to Milford, Ohio. That was his first job with the FAA. And after a year and a half, my parents decided they wanted to move back to the East Coast. So he moved. He bidded for Byrd Field, Richmond, Virginia. Mm-hmm. And so my mom and my brother went.
Now Byrd, that's Richmond International Airport.
It's Richmond.
It used to be Byrd.
Right.
Yeah.
It's Richmond International Airport.
Yeah.
He was part of. So it was a language barrier almost. It was a different way of living, different foods, greens and grits and all that stuff. So it took them a time to decide to move because of the culture change, and Highland Springs, Virginia was in a Baptist Bible Belt, and we were Catholic. So it was like what are we going to do? So my dad said, yeah, we want to get closer to Peckville, Pennsylvania, where my grandparents lived, so they moved to Richmond. And that was in the 7th grade, and that's where we finally settled after when I was 13.
So what was your first introduction to the church? At what age were you introduced to the church?
Very, very young. My mother and my father were of two different rites of the Catholic Church. My dad was the Roman Catholic, and that was my grandma Baginski. And my grandmother Tedesco was of the Byzantine rite, which is the Ukrainian rite. So they went to high school together. They met in high school, and so at a very early.
They met in high school. Where at?
Peckville, Pennsylvania.
In Pennsylvania,
Yeah,
okay.
Blakely, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So my grandmother Tedesco, my grandmother Baginski was more a religious person for me. She was the one that taught me to pray. She said the rosary every day. She was all about God gave us this. God gave us frogs. She liked frog legs, and my brother liked frog legs. So she would cook the frogs, and God gave us everything. And she was called, her nickname was Aunt Jenny to the community, but to me, she was Grandma. And she took me aside and she said, we're going to go to church. So she would take me to church, a lot. Because it was all hills. It was in the Pocono Mountain, close to the Pocono Mountains, not in them, but close. So it was a lot. It was a coal mining town. Both grandfathers were coal miners. So she was the one, I would say, was my anchor. Now, my other
What
side,
age did she start taking you?
3 or 4.
Oh, 3 or 4.
Yeah. Anytime I visited up there.
Oh, okay. So okay.
Yeah. Anytime we would go from Wyoming to Peckville, she would take me to church.
Okay, I guess that's okay.
Okay, so I was introduced at a very young age to her way of spirituality. Now, my grandmother Tedesco was much different. I saw her pray a lot, but I don't know what she was saying because it was in Russian. Because the Byzantine rite that my mother was raised in was Ukrainian, and they spoke Russian in church. So I didn't know much about that religion, except for my mom. My mom knew her prayers in Russian. And my dad spoke Polish and my mom spoke Russian.
But everywhere you moved, did you find a church in?
Everywhere but Ohio. Ohio was, I'd say, a good 45 minutes or an hour away from where we lived. And we would only go periodically. We weren't regular goers like we were like I was raised in.
Right.
So that was difficult.
Okay.
So I'm going to have to say this part too. When we lived in New Jersey, I used to walk to church because the church wasn't far, and when it was the 6th grade, and I didn't go to parochial school. I went to public school. So on Thursdays we would have religious ed. Well, the nun came to me and she said, this is probably, I don't know, anyway, she said, you don't need to stay here this whole year. Well, I started crying. What do you mean I don't need to come? I love my church. I walked to, I don't know what to do. I was in tears, and she didn't tell me really why. She just said, you don't need to come. But in the 6th grade is when the Catholic Church has confirmation. And I was baptized and confirmed at the same time when I was born. May. I was born April, May. I was baptized and confirmed in the Ukrainian church, in the Byzantine rite of the church. So she was telling me I didn't have to come, and I'm going, yes, I want to come. So it was.
But that's as a kind of a ritual thing at that age. That you stay out of church for a certain number.
No, you don't. No, because if you were in the Roman rite, that was the time for confirmation. But they were putting two rites of the Catholic Church in me. And so I had already been confirmed, so I didn't have to. Religion was always a piece of me.
So let me ask this: what were some of the first things you learned about God and the Bible?
I think one of the first big things that stuck with me was when you go to First Communion, you go to First Confession. We have confession to a priest. That's one of the rites of the Catholic. One of the building blocks of the Catholic Church. So when I went to confession, I thought everything was a sin. I mean, because I would do something like set the table wrong or do something wrong. That's a sin, Or if I went somewhere where I wasn't supposed to go, and then come back, a couple hours later. That's a sin. So everything. I thought it was a fearful God, not a loving God.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then I think that part is where I also learned that in the same tone, because I was going to instruction. You have to go for instructions for this, for First Communion. I learned that God is loving, that God was on the cross. I mean, Jesus was on the cross for us. So that was like first grade, second grade.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned these things, but I was immature. And they didn't stick.
Reading the Bible.
I probably started reading the Bible when I was a junior in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's when my instructions were, let's bring out the Bible and let's talk about the Bible. It was like a Bible study.
Mm-hmm.
Intermingled with Mass.
Mm-hmm.
What was the Mass about?
Mm-hmm.
We found this, and this. We find this in the Bible. We find.
Mm-hmm.
So of course they were corresponding what was in the Bible to what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably where I got my first Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I didn't understand a lot.
Yeah.
Remedial reading was hard for me. I mean, I took remedial reading for 4 years because I didn't read till I was in sixth grade.
Mm-hmm.
So it was hard for me to read.
Right,
so, I think the personal piece that a priest came and sat with me and said, this is what it is. His name is Father Stocker. And he goes, this is what we're doing, and this is why the Mass is like it is. This is where you find this scripture in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And so...
okay.
Those kind of things. So I knew more about the living of the Bible more than the scripture of the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
But you knew the living part of the Bible, of like how to live biblically, from the teachings of your parents and
right.
priests and what they told you, not of reading the Bible.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, switching gears a little bit, what was it like to first get the diagnosis of manic depressive illness? I know was one of your diagnoses, right. And so what was that like when you first got
all,
that?
It didn't happen overnight. My diagnosis didn't happen overnight. I did some risky things way before I was diagnosed. Like driving a car. I wasn't supposed to. I was on 14. I'd steal a car or go out the window. I didn't steal a car, but it was my parents' car.
Mm-hmm.
I'd go out the bedroom window. I would just do things that were not very good for a child, 13, 14 years, 15, 16 years old. So I married a man. I'm going to go way back. I married a man in 60 days. He had 2 children. Now, if that wasn't, I don't know what crazy. I'm going to use the word crazy as a native.
Maybe impulsive?
And all I could see was 2 kids just like Sound of Music.
Yeah.
That's my Catholic brain. I was going to take care of these kids. I was going to take care of him and blah, blah, blah. Well, he left me for another woman and left his kids with me after 10 years. So I lost 4 babies at birth, 2 baby boys and 2 miscarriages. So
in those 10 years?
I was married 10 years to him.
In those 10 years is when you
in
lost
those 10 years, that's
children.
what happened.
Yeah.
And so my church life was not what it should be because he was Baptist and he was persuading me to go to the Baptist church and he was 7 years older than I was, and so he had a reign of me. So I had my children baptized Catholic. Those 2 children that I raised, I baptized them Catholic, and he wasn't real happy, but so be it. So then I had that, and then we got divorced. I felt like half of me was lost. I went into a psychiatric hospital, Westbrook, for situational depression. And I came out with all these tools that my therapist was telling me about. You can do this, and you can get a job, and I never worked. So I got my first full-time job with Williamsburg Press in 1976,
mm-hmm.
and that's the year he left me with his kids with no support because the law said they're not mine. I can give him back.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you have kids and raise kids, I couldn't do that.
Right.
I loved them as my own. So I kept them.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a job.
How old were you when you got that job?
When I left him, I was 29. 29 or 30. Because I got married at 19. So, I was Girl Scout leader, Cub Scout leader, Sunday school teacher, everything I thought the kids needed. But at 19, I was making decisions that were outrageous, really. But I kept them. I gave them the decision on who wanted to go live with their dad and who wanted to stay. Well, the daughter stayed with me, and that was tough. You have a 19-year-old. Well, she was 19 and pregnant, and that was tough. And I was working. My new husband, I married in the Catholic Church. We were married 5 years, 4.5 years, and that's when I got sick, 1981. It was like so many of those plugs of the past were there, and it was just like one more plug, and I exploded. And how I exploded was I was like an outer experience where I went in direct traffic with no clothes on on a country road. And then they were trying to figure out what to do with me, and I was trying to tell them I wasn't going to stay at the first hospital because that's where my husband left me, so I didn't want the second one to leave me there, so they got a Greenmore, and I was hospitalized in cuffs from the hospital and taken to another hospital where I stayed for 30 days. And I didn't know who I was, didn't know where I was.
Now, just for me to say this, green warrant is what they would call today as a TDO, temporary detection order.
The only reason it was called a green warrant is because you got the green piece of paper. Yeah,
and that's what it was before everybody calls it TDO now. But anyway, I just wanted.
They didn't have my neighbor went and got a green warrant from the magistrate, just like a person would now. So I guess. In a way, that was good. In a way, it was bad because that's where I met me, myself, and I.
So you had been in the hospital, and do you agree with the diagnosis with having as much experience as you have now in the mental health field and worked in it for a long time?
Yeah,
and
since 2000.
Looking back, do you agree with it? And
I think it was a good diagnosis because manic depression that's what it was called then. Now it's called bipolar because of the stigma. So yes, because at that time I needed the medication, I needed therapy, I needed a path to go on. I need treatment. So then, yes, it was good. Now as I look back, yes, but it was a time that I was told that I was going to have this illness the rest of my life. So that was like a death sentence. Almost. Somebody told you this is the way you're going to be.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate in one way because.
So basically, you were told you were going to be like that the rest of your life, but that was in a situation where you probably weren't working, right?
Oh, I was working.
Oh, you were working.
Yeah, I was out on leave because I was in the hospitals. I was in the hospital
what was? Let me hone down on that. Is when they said that you were going to be like that for the rest of your life. What was be like that? What was it?
Be like manic and depressed.
You go through these highs and lows.
I go through the cycles.
All these highs and lows.
I didn't know whether I was a rapid cycler or a situational cycler where things would happen and then I would get in depression or whatever. Right. Or was it a clinical, and it ended up being clinical because for a while that's how I was. So 5 years go by, and I'm at my desk, and I'm working with, I worked with magazines, ads, pickups, what did somebody print? Like, I handled the top 9 accounts the company had. Science Magazine, Marine Corps, Leatherneck, National Shorthand Report, art magazines, some controversial magazines, psychiatric magazines and stuff. So I handled a lot of magazines. And I was sitting at my desk and I'm flipping this magazine for National Shorthand Reporter, and it goes, each page was somebody was recovering from something. Whether it would have been depression, whether it would be diabetes, whether it be heart, whether it be limbs missing. Somebody was, and then I flipped a page and this lady was recovering from manic depression. And I just, wow, that's me. I got to call this lady. And so I called her that night and I said, you're in Illinois, I'm in Virginia, what can we do? She said, let's talk about a support group. And I'm going, tell me more. She said, well, I'm going to Washington to meet my sister. Could you meet me there and I'll have some information? So I met her in Washington, and she was the, vice president or somebody of the National Manic Depressive Support Group.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, it was like, wow. And so I started the first bipolar support group in 1985
mm-hmm.
at Tucker Pavilion with... I had a medical advisor,
mm-hmm.
and it started snowballing. It was just
mm-hmm.
awesome because I'd have speakers, I'd get in small groups,
mm-hmm.
and I was the leader, and I liked to be the leader. So that's where I started really having the confidence to say, this is not a sentence. This is just I'm on a journey. That's what I kept saying. You're on a journey, but you're not at the end of your journey.
What was a spiritual encounter that you had that was like an aha moment for you?
Okay, so as I started the support group, I started getting better. They put me on a different shift where I was working on second shift, doing another job, not with magazines, but not the same job as flying around and helping people with the magazine. So I was helping with a lot of putting magazines together. It's called pre-press. And my boss said, tell me more about your religion. He said, I know you're Catholic. So I am too, and I'd like to know, how is it going? I said, well, it's going really well because I went up to Pennsylvania to visit my aunt, take my aunt back to Pennsylvania, and I saw a priest there, and I talked with him for 3 hours. And I came back, and all he said was to go and love and serve the Lord in Virginia. I said, okay. So I said, I didn't tell that to anybody, but that's what happened. And then I started teaching Sunday school and started kindergartners. So he said, well, are you ready for a women's weekend? And I said, I guess so. He said, well, it's your birthday, and I've already cleared your desk, hoping that you'd say yes. And my wife will take you up to Montpelier to the retreat house.
This is your boss?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, this is my boss.
Yeah.
And he said, I really think you're ready for this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, okay. I said, how much is it? He says, oh, don't worry about it. So I went, his wife took me to Montpelier, and it was called a Crucio weekend. It's a short study of the Catholic Church. So nobody knew me. Nobody knew that I had an illness, right? Nobody knew what was going on. Maybe the priest did. I don't know. But anyway, so the first day was great. Second day was learning more about it. We had fun and learning more about our lives, our stories. The other women told their stories of how different things happened in their life, piety, what books and songs do they like, and it was. I think it was 2 talks, or 3 talks a day, and then we would have a time of relaxation, or we have a time of talking it out with our table.
How many women in the retreat?
There was 25.
Mm-hmm.
5 tables of 5.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we would have to draw like what we heard scripture-wise, like where are you in this picture? So I learned, I'm a big box, I'm a surprise, and whatever. So, and then we had in the process, we had to write a letter to Christ. So I wrote, and then you put it in an envelope, mailed it back. They mailed it to you 2 months later. And I wrote in that letter, if you help me get well, I will work in your vineyard.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote that.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Jesus, I love you, as you love me. Where that came from, scripture, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
And my name. And so I was like, I'm done. My letter was short, sweet, and I mailed it, and I sealed it, and I gave it back, and they put it in an envelope, and I thought, I'll never see this again. So the next morning, that was on a Saturday, Sunday morning at 5:30 in the morning, I went to the bathroom, and a cloud came out of the lake, or the pond that was next to it, and it came up to the bathroom window and came through the window, and I'm sitting on the toilet. And it's squeezing me, and I'm going, please, not now, in my head, because I couldn't yell because there was women out there. This is, we were like in a cottage. I said, please, no, 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 and I was going, no, and I'm pushing it away, and screaming in my head. I felt like a fish in a tank with no water. That's how I felt. And so and finally I said, okay, be calm and be still. That's what the voice was telling me in the cloud. And I said it as a mantra, and I kept going, be calm and be still, be calm and be still. And then it went away. I followed it out the window and back to the pond. Who do you tell you're sitting on the toilet at 5:30 in the morning? I don't know. So I sat there for a long time, and I didn't know what to do. And so I knew a medical doctor was one of the ladies that were out in the bed. And I woke her up and I said, Dorothy, I heard a voice say, be calm and be still. She said, what did it say? I said, it said, be calm and be still. And she said, shut up and listen. Okay. So I lay down in my cot. I don't know how long, because everybody had left and they had all gone to breakfast. And I didn't know what to do. So I knocked on the door, and the lady looked at me and she says, don't ruin it for everybody else. And I'm going, oh my God, what did I do? And she said, I'm going to get a person to talk to you, who was a deacon. And I said, whatever, this is what happened. So this deacon and I we must have walked and walked and walked. And he said, are you all right? And I said, yeah. I told him what happened, and he said, are you okay? And I said, I'm fine, I know what happened. So that afternoon was called the closing, and there was other people there from all over the Richmond area, maybe 100. And so every person got up and said what the weekend was like. So I got up and said...
What was that, like friends and family of women?
Yeah, friends and family came up to the weekend, and they met you. Then you became part of the Curcio community. So I told them that we were building a church in New King County, and that was 1990, and I was part of that process. And we were building a church, and then I got real excited. And the whole time, though, when I was growing up, I had a pretend friend.
You had what?
A pretend friend. Her name was Judy. Every time I couldn't figure out something or I'd get upset, I'd pull Judy in. Even when I was in the hospital, I was talking to Judy. And Judy never changed. Judy was always Judy. And so I was looking at the audience, and I was giving this talk about New Kent County and our church, and there was a lady standing against the wall, and she was smiling, and I was smiling back, but I didn't know. I guess the audience thought I was smiling at them. I don't know. And she waved, and she went into the wall, and I've never seen Judy again.
Wow.
Ever.
Yeah. So that imaginary friend.
What happened? I think this is what happened. I think Jesus came into my heart, and I didn't need Judy anymore. I started out very small. I took a course on church history, and then I took another course at Virginia Institute of Pastoral Care. It was a 2-year course. And then
So how old were you at that retreat when that happened?
How old?
Yeah.
I don't know. It was I was born in 1948. You figure it out.
So 1990 and 48, almost 50, and 90 is 42. 42.
And 52, I graduated from Loyola University.
Okay. So 42 is when you really started educating yourself on spirituality and
God, the Bible,
the Catholic faith. I guess. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Help yourself first. That was all about helping yourself. And the next was overcoming my barriers, all scripture. And then preventing pain. There's a small scripture. Some of it I took from friends. And then he was educating. So that was my whatever they call it, the big thing at the end of the 2 years.
Right.
That's what they were giving.
Right.
And so I talked about my illness. I talked about my recovery, how God was in my recovery, and it was like a 45 minutes to an hour. And then I gave them each a calendar. I figured that's what I could do.
Yeah.
And in that process, Dr. Hamilton was the professor. She said to me like this, and I said, what? And she said, come over here. And I said, like, did I do something wrong? She said, oh no, we're going to lay hands on you. You want to be a chaplain in a church. You want to be a chaplain in a hospital. I commend that you be something in the community. You are community oriented. God placed this person in the community. And I'm going, I had chills from the top of my head to the tip of my toes. Like, I mean, I didn't, at that point in time, I didn't know what she was talking about.
Right.
Because she had more insight than I had. So.
Yeah. Again, with your experience in the field, what is it you've seen that has changed since you were first exposed to the mental health system until today, with you still working in it, in the mental health field?
I'm going to go way back to 81 when I was diagnosed and things happened. There wasn't anything called peer specialist. There wasn't even, if you went, I had to get permission to do a worship service on the psych floor of St. Mary's, especially because I had been there as a patient. So they had to give permission for me to do that. I did that for 7 years, a non-denominational worship service using the Bible and readings and songs. And I had anywhere from 15 to 20 patients come to my little service once a month. So that piece was not heard of. Okay, so coming after graduation, I put out 50 applications all over the place, and I went for this interview, and the interview was on the cusp of people with mental illness working in the community.
After the graduation from
Loyola,
that's when you put out applications.
Yeah, I graduated in May.
Okay.
And, I graduated in April, and then I just started, sending that application because I didn't know where I was going. So I got an interview with Chesterfield County, and it was almost an hour. Plus, I got lost getting there because coming over the James River is a new world. I mean, for me, I'd never been over here, so I got lost, and I was late. And then I told the doctor that I'm sorry, I just got lost. I don't know where I was. We didn't have GPSs then. So we talked about, and I showed him all the awards I have gotten from NAMI and Loyola and St. Mary's and just all places that I have in the bipolar support group. And he looked him over and he said, this is very interesting because this is where we are. He said, we haven't hired anybody in that role yet. So what am I going to do?
This was in Chesterfield County, the Community Service Board? Okay. And,
what am I going to do? What are you going to... So he said that I would work on a team of counselors and I would have to do assessments and go out into the field and talk to people in their houses and that kind of stuff. That's okay. I said, I told him plain, I said, I'm a person with a mental illness, and I don't know how biased I would be to somebody that was mentally ill. People wrote about me. What did they write? Did they write, she's a bad person or whatever? I want to be the person that's honest and upfront and let them know what I'm doing. And he goes, oh, he was like, who are you? So it was about an hour interviewing, so I got all my stuff ready to go. It was packed up, ready to go. He goes, oh, no, I want to talk to you one more minute. And I'm going, oh, God, help me, because I don't know what else to say. So he said, can you tell me about the annulment process of the Catholic Church? And I'm going, I can, because I have an annulment, but this is not part of an interview. In my head, I'm going like,
yeah.
What happened? And so I walked out of the door and I looked up and I said, God, you sent me on an errand. I don't know if I got this job or not. It's in your hands.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks went by and I didn't hear anything. So I was in church and this song called "Here I Am, Lord." I don't know if you know it. Here I am, Lord. It is I, Lord. I come to do your work. And it was they were singing it, and I walked out, and I was crying, and my friend comes out behind me, why are you crying? This is your song, and I said, I know. I said, but I'm looking for this job, and I didn't get it, and blah, blah. She said, hang in there. Stop crying.
Yeah.
So I went home, and the next day, the doctor called me. And he said, you've got the job. Could you come for... The ICT team came up, the intensive community team. They were just starting, and they needed a person with a mental illness. And I was hem-hawing about it because I didn't want to be classified as a person with mental illness all my life. So I took it to God, and he said, try it. So I was the first peer specialist, but they didn't even call it peer specialist back then. They called it counselor or something.
Peer counselor?
Yeah, they didn't call it peer specialist. So that's when I started working for the ICT department. And I wanted to be treated equal. I wanted to, and you followed me, so you know I put that up front. Don't treat me any different than you would treat anybody else.
Hospitalization, you said, was, what, at 19 or?
Yeah, 1981.
So your first introduction to the mental health system from then until present day now.
Right.
The changes you've seen, do you feel positive about the changes you've seen?
It was different. The hospital I went to for the very first time was like a motel. It had beautiful curtains, greens and blues, and it had crafts. It had a swimming pool. It had a basketball court. It had tennis courts. It was like going to a... So what did I learn?
Yeah.
I learned that, this is nice. But I didn't have any education along the way. Now they have groups, and they have talked. Even when I was diagnosed in 1981, it was different. It was more sterile, you might say. It was more, let's do exercises, let's do meditations, let's learn how to cook pizza or whatever we did. And they also, back then, insurance would allow you to not leave the facility, but leave the inside of the building with somebody. Like my dad would come and visit, we would walk around, and they had flowers and stuff. So it was before you weren't even allowed to visit. The other thing is, a long time ago, in 1976, when I first got diagnosed, my husband left me. They wouldn't let a priest come visit me because that would interfere with my mental thinking. So I lost my priest and I lost my husband. So that was a big thing for me.
Yeah.
And now they're incorporating spirituality into recovery. They're not pushing it aside.
Okay.
So that's a big thing. I think that was one of the biggest things that that I saw was the spirituality part, was the incorporating spirituality into recovery.
So you're still working in the field. I know that because we are co-workers. But what keeps you motivated to keep doing the good work you're doing in the mental health field?
What motivates me is when a person gets the aha moment and they go, God, if she could do it, I could do it. Or I have people that come up and say, will you be my case manager? Well, no, because I work part-time and you have a full-time case manager. Sorry, but that's a compliment. I take that as a compliment.
Right.
And so what motivates me is seeing people grow. That I often tell people that social rehab places are not places to live in. They're places to grow from. And because some people think it's like a sentence, like, I have to go here. And if you don't learn anything from that, then my own motivation is to find somebody in the audience that like have their heads down or they're not paying attention, and check in with them after the group and go, what did you learn?
Call them out.
Yeah, call them out. Why are you here?
Yeah.
Why are you here? Why are you coming? And some people get, I don't know, my mom said I had to come. I said, then you're not learning anything.
Yeah.
Your mom is.
Yeah.
So I try to put responsibility on them, because that's when I talked about me, myself, and I, that's when I learned the most. When I had to take responsibility for me. And so that's what keeps me motivated, is to see. It's my passion. It's where, I live, like I tell people to hold on to their dreams. My dream was to build a log home.
Mm-hmm.
People said, oh, you can't do that because you're a woman or you're mentally ill or this or that. I live in the home of my dream. Hold on to the dream that you want.
Mm-hmm.
So, I can go on and on.
So, what would you like to see more of in the way of making things more beneficial to the way mental health services are delivered? Are there any things that you...
I think one of the things that we have failed in is the peer specialist training. The peer specialist people that want to be peer specialists, and they get a certificate and then they have nowhere to go. There's so many people that pass these tests and they're still out there with nowhere to go. There's several of them at Chester House that, they don't know. Yeah, I'm a peer specialist, but what does that mean?
Yeah.
So I think that was a big failure in the communication of what we wanted to put peer specialists in. The other thing is we need to have a supervisor supervise peer specialists.
Mm-hmm.
We need supervisors that are peer specialists that,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe, I don't want to say ahead, but they have gotten to the point of they know what's expected,
Mm-hmm.
and we help them, weekly or monthly.
Mm-hmm.
Do I think we're doing them an injustice
Mm-hmm.
of not having their own peer specialist supervisor.
Right.
And then the other injustices, we have communities out there, such as where I live. I'm not going to say where I live, but where I live,
Mm-hmm.
that have 2 or 3 people working in the community.
Yeah, underserved populations.
Underserved population.
Mm-hmm.
They have one doctor that comes once a week.
Mm-hmm.
They have two clinical therapists.
Mm-hmm.
And they have all these people that I tell people to move. Move to Chesterfield.
Yeah, move to somewhere.
I do.
Yeah.
Because they're not doing themselves any justice.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the 2 areas that I see need more improvement on.
Yeah, so I know you've written a book, so I wanted to hear a little bit about your book, just, what the title is and, what made you write it and, what was that process like for you?
Okay. I'm going to go back to probably 2000 when I had some time on my time, between the 2 jobs. And I was talking to my therapist and I said, I've got a lot going this way, and I don't have getting the education, and education is knowledge, but I have a lot of these personal things that happen because of my illness. And she said, well, what do you want to do? And I go, I want to write a book. And at first she said, okay, tell me more. It was before that because it was my buddy next door. The desk next door was editing my book. So anyway, we were talking. I said, well, how do you do that? She said, I want you to start with 0 and to the age you are now. I'm 60, whatever I was, 63. And she said, I want you to start with your family, where you were born, your family, your brothers and sisters, did you have any at the time, and start grandparents and start working. Like my grandparents were from Russia, they were from the Ukraine, and they were from Poland and Italy. Mm-hmm. And I said, and then she said, well, then write about them, and then start with them, and then go back to, like, when you were born, where were they? Where did you see your grandfather play his first baseball game? Mm-hmm. He was a baseball fanatic, but anyway. Where did you see the coal mines? Did you ever go down to coal mines? And so she had me writing about them. Mm-hmm. And then the next week she would say, okay, you've written about them from 1 to whatever, or 0 to whatever. And then she said, start writing about your faith. Where did your faith come from? Mm-hmm. I have statues that came over from Poland from my grandmother, my grandfather, and so where did that come from? So she had me writing about that all the way up until, and it took me a longer time than I thought, because you get one idea and then you get another idea and then you get another idea, and so then she started writing. Then it was like my my schooling, kindergarten, where did I go, and then write about that, and the teachers, and the friends, and it just keeps snowballing, and then I got obsessed with it, with writing, and so then it came, to college, and then you'd write about, like, the first car you got, first accident you were in, did you learn how to tire? She was laughing. Did you learn how to change a tire? So that, and so I wrote about every subject that you can think of in that 62 or 63 years. And then that was only facts. That wasn't stories. That was just facts.
Yeah.
So then you tie the facts into stories. And then you come up with a paragraph. And then you start. She didn't see the book. She didn't see the book of the beginning. She was just like, and you don't write very well. And I said, yeah, but I got a secret. So then it was 2006, because we came to 2013. 2006 that my dad passed away, and he was my anchor. He kept saying, you could do this, you could do this. So I started working on it more intensely. And then in 2013, 2013, I saw Dr. Wayne Dyer. Do you know who Dr. Wayne Dyer is?
I've heard of him.
Incredible. I read all of his books. Cassettes. Oh, did I use a bad word? Cassettes.
Yes. It's old things.
Cassettes and books.
I remember him.
So I met him at a conference. I went to one of his conferences. I paid $500 for a conference in Washington, D.C. And I had this little bucket of yellow stuff, like yellow pencils, yellow paper, yellow book, everything was yellow in the bucket. And they wouldn't let me get close to him, so I went behind the stage, the opposite way where those guards were. And I said, Mr. Dyer, Dr. Dyer, I got something for you. And he said, sit down. And he said, let me hear your story. So he said, I only got 15 minutes. Can you say it? And so I told him the story. I said, here's your bucket. And he said, I own a company called Bipolar Press. And he says, I'll see what I can do. And so I gave
So
him,
the book was written, and you were just looking to get it published.
And so I met him, and then he took a little bit off the book, and then he gave me a bracelet that has all the talks of the whole weekend that I went to. It was like $1,000 bracelet, plug into the computer. Of course, I didn't know what to do with it, but so he was like, that was like, the name of the conference was You Can Do It, and it was like a push.
Yeah.
It was like, okay. And then my mom died the next year, and then I had some money to publish it. So that's how.
So it was a long process to write it, and then
I have so many drafts that that's like the.
And then to get it published, and now it's in print, and I've seen it, and it's in hardcover. What's the name of it?
Walking in Hope, Living in Grace.
Okay. Walking in Hope, Living in Grace.
Because that's where I was. Walking in Hope was all the stuff that went on in my life, and Walking in Grace is where I feel like I'm living now.
Awesome.
I've been graced.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Where can you get it?
Oh, you can get it at Amazon, or you can get it from me, or you can get it at Fine Book, wherever fine books are sold. I have to put this in. I met my husband in the book. My book was published, ready to go, and the publisher said, you've got to find him because there was a piece in there about him. I didn't have any clue where to start. So anyway, I found him in York, Pennsylvania, and this is like 1967 to 2014. So we dated for 2 years, and then we got married, and we got married in the Catholic Church. I brought him home. He was out of the church for 15. Well, he said 30-some years because of his work and blah, blah, blah. And we ain't getting married. You don't come back. So,
nice.
Evangelizing again.
Nice. Well, that's a good story. That's a great story. And I enjoyed listening to it. I hope you've enjoyed Maryalyce's story and can take some things away from it if you are dealing with a mental illness, know somebody who has a mental illness, or just listened for educational value. You heard Maryalyce say, don't give up on your dreams, because like her, they can come true, even though you may be dealing with a mental illness. You also heard her say that if she can get well, anybody can get well and still have a full life. As you can see, Maryalyce is a great example and role model for people dealing with mental illness. If you want to hear more in depth her story, you can always buy and read her book, titled Walking in Hope, Living in Grace. Again, thank you so much for your time.